have no idea why this is not working.
Okay.
Okay, so welcome to the Philadelphia Commission of Human Relations public session. Today is Friday, December 20th. Can we start the meeting with the approval of the minutes? And I'm going to ask you to signify that with a thumbs up. Looks like we can. No corrections noted. So I move that we accept the minutes and that they are submitted into the record. Next up are the cases recommended for closing. I'm going to go ahead and read the case names. And I'm going to ask for the recusals at that point. And I think that the recusals can be heard, even though I won't hear them. The recusals can be heard by people who need to record them. So let me go ahead and read the case names.
Sarah, do you want me to read them? Oh, okay. Read the case names. Here we go.
So case names recommended for closing.
Okay. Case number 1, Luz Barbara.
You know what? I'm going to ask somebody else to read the case names, and I'm going to tell you why. I didn't realize this document would be sideways. It's a bit hard to read.
Okay, I've got it. Luz Barbara.
So let me ask, is there somebody else who could read the case names?
Can someone tell Sarah I am reading? Luz Barbara Castro versus Best Buy Roofing LLC and Richard Young. Case number.
Commissioner Alpert, great.
Catherine Thomas versus Best Buy Roofing LLC and Richard Young. Case number 3, Marquita D. Lee versus RDH.
Tom, can you help me here?
Shekiasa Dennison versus Ameribest Home Care Incorporated. Sean N. Hayes versus City of Philadelphia Department of Prisons. Glenn Usher versus School District of Philadelphia. Tristan Scott Harvey versus Summerwood Corporation, also known as Taco Bell. One moment. Vanessa Ransom. Oh, hang on just a second. Somehow that disappeared. And I've got to get it back. Try this again. Okay. Sorry about that. Vanessa Ransom Ellison versus Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Eric Epperson versus Cintas Corporation. Deborah A. Hampton versus School District of Philadelphia. James Davis versus the Contractors Association of Eastern Pennsylvania. Rochelle Reynolds versus Temple University. Carolyn Tiger versus the Vanguard Group, Inc. Nisa Ramsey versus Allied Universal. Aretha Davis versus Merrickey Woodhaven. Devona Riley versus ANZ Philly QSR 2 LLC. Nicholas D. Marcantonio versus HCC Marketing Incorporated, also known as Holtz Cigar Company. Victor Leandri versus MSK Management LLC, also known as Domino's Pizza. Those were the employment cases. The housing cases. Joanne Tubman versus Waterfront Square Condominium Association and the Peninsula Condominium and Spa at the Waterfront Square Association. And Geraldine Calley versus Success Mortgage Partners. In public accommodations, we have Joan Favre versus SP Plus Corporation. Jennifer Morales Torres versus Mia Ragazza. The Ban the Box cases, James Johnson versus REEF Technology Incorporated, and Nia Consuela Stallworth Rawls versus Deer Meadows Nursing Home and Rehab. The Do Not Solicit Wholesalers cases, Homeset Solutions, Homeset Home Solutions, and Instant Offer Home Buyers. I don't know if Sarah can hear me, but that is all of the cases. And am I supposed to ask for recusals?
Sarah would do that, but because she can't hear us, let's go ahead and have you make a
Okay. So Sarah, is Sarah gonna come on, and Sarah, are you gonna, well, Sarah won't know. The recusals. I recuse from employment case number 12. Are there any other recusals? Okay, I believe that my job is completed here, except for calling for a vote, except I assume Sarah was supposed to call for the vote, but
Let's see if we can get her back on. So we apologize for the technical difficulties here today.
Can't hear anything.
All right, you're back, Sarah. I don't know if she can hear. Just a moment.
Okay, sounds like the case closings are complete. I have tried very hard to figure out what's going on with my volume, but I do not know. Okay, can I have a motion to accept the cases? I don't know if you have already done that.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I should ask for recusals first. I apologize. Are there any recusals? As you know, I cannot hear you. I'm going to assume that recusals have been noted. Can I now have a motion to accept the cases? Great. I see Commissioner Tibbs moving to accept the cases and seconded by Commissioner Ho. So we will go ahead and accept all of those cases for closings with the recusals noted. Case closings for the month of December have been accepted. Thank you. I will turn over the meeting now to Kia Gee for the Executive Director report. And that will be followed by a presentation by former Commissioner Regina Austin. So let me turn that over right now to Kia.
Thank you, Commissioner Ricks. And we appreciate you fighting through your technical challenges. I know you can't hear me, but we appreciate it. I have a brief report for today. I'm going to start. I apologize if my voice is low. I don't have much of a voice. I'm not feeling well. But I will start with our compliance update. I want to give a huge congratulations and kudos to the compliance team, Deputy Director Pamela Gwaltney, and the rest of the team for securing a $34,000 for 4 victims of discrimination for this month, along with 2 private settlements for undisclosed amounts. In terms of community engagement, prevention and education, HR representatives David Oliver and Tiara Thompson conducted a conflict resolution training for CLIP staff and have additional training scheduled throughout January of 2025. HR Representative Boone Ratmat and Deputy Director Randy Duque participated in the 2025 Peace Islands Institute Public Heroes Awards, where they presented Executive Director Saran Chan of the Cambodian Association for Greater Philadelphia, along with Philadelphia Police Inspector Jerome Thomas with their awards. Deputy Director Duque has also been meeting with community leaders, law enforcement partners, and immigrant and refugee groups to discuss their concerns around mass deportation. Other noteworthy events for this month, December 5th, I met with community leaders and residents at the West Parkside Association to discuss the services and protections offered through our office. Deputy Director Randy Duque also co-presented as part of the Strong Cities Network North American Hub, their webinar series, An Introduction to City-Led Prevention of Hate and Targeted Violence. The series is a four-part exploration of how local governments in the United States and Canada get more involved in approaches to address hate and targeted violence. Over the next reporting period, HR Representative Carlos Avalos will present the Spanish version of our Good Neighbor Guide at upcoming fall and winter trainings. Also, Deputy Director Randy Duque has been working with the Department of Parks and Recreation to review Mummers themes for their upcoming Mummers Day Parade, to ensure that they are adhering to their approved costumes and themes and policing themselves. He will also be on site for the annual Mummers Day Parade to monitor the event. In terms of hate and bias incidents that were reported to us for this month, there were 7 confirmed incidents of hate or bias. Those incidents centered largely on race and ethnicity, as well as religion and anti-LGBTQ sentiment. They were as follows. There was a middle school child who received an offensive and racist text message. It was similar to those that had been sent to African American communities throughout the country shortly following the presidential elections. There was also a masked offender who wrote words, "Israel equals genocide," on the front of a Jewish frat house, and a man who yelled expletives and threatened violence after being asked to leave the grounds of a Jewish center in the Northeast. This person had previous complaints against him at a synagogue that was also associated with the center. In terms of anti-LGBTQ reports that we received about anti-LGBTQ incidents, there was a person in Old City who was called a trans slur and spit on when she confronted a couple about their behavior. There was another person who was called an anti-LGBTQ slur and struck on their back while they were in a South Philadelphia store. There was a person in the Germantown section of Philadelphia who was called a gay slur and threatened to be shot by a neighbor who simply for asking them to move their car from in front of his property. There was also a person in the Fishtown area of the city whose car was damaged and vandalized with a gay slur and lewd drawings of male genitalia on their vehicle. For all of these incidents, the victims have been connected with victim services if necessary, and we have been monitoring the trends as they continue throughout the year. We will be presenting our report about the state of hate in the top of the new year for 2025. So please stay tuned for that. With that said, that will conclude my executive director's report. I will allow for questions and then I will introduce former Commissioner and Professor Regina Alston. Okay, hearing no questions, I am pleased to introduce our former Commissioner, Commissioner Regina Alston. Former Commissioner Alston is a professor of law at the University of Pennsylvania. Her work focuses primarily on the impact of law on cultural conflicts arising from largely from race, gender, and class inequality. She has had a significant impact on the work of the commission throughout her tenure as a commissioner here. In her last year, she spearheaded a research project which examined traffic violence, pedestrian deaths, and their intersection with equity. She compiled a report that is available through the University of. Yes, we may welcome our guests. If there are any guests here for our presentation, I would like to welcome you to the public session of the Commission on Human Relations. Um, as we always do, we go through our case closings. We vote on those. I give a report about what the commission has been working on. And then today we have a special guest with us who is our former commissioner. As I said, Commissioner Alston spearheaded this research project, which provides a critical context on how inequalities and inequities in transportation infrastructure and societal values contribute to disparities in pedestrian safety here in Philadelphia. She will explain today, really briefly, how this issue is critical to our work and discuss the factors driving disparities for deaths and significant injuries here in Philadelphia. She will also offer recommendations for how we can work to achieve more equitable outcomes. I want to give a special acknowledgement of Andrew Goodman, who is here on behalf of Council Member Jamie Gaudier's office. So thank you all for joining us here today. And I will turn it over to you, Professor Alston. You're on mute.
Thank you, Kia, and I want to thank the members of the commission for allowing me to discuss a subject that I became interested in when I was serving on the commission, namely the disparate impact of traffic violence on Black and Latino pedestrians in Philadelphia. The opinions I will express are my own and do not necessarily reflect the positions of the Pchr or the City of Philadelphia. I know as well that I have a bias with regard to these issues. I am a non-driving walker, a senior citizen, and a clumsy person. I have also spent a year, 2023, reading every news story I could find about pedestrians killed or injured on the streets of Philadelphia. I can tell you that reading stories is very important and maybe more important than the statistics I will share with you. I view that the issue of pedestrian safety in Philadelphia falls within the mission of the Pchr. Just a reminder, the mission is fighting discrimination, ensuring equal rights, and helping build strong communities. We have to start with Philadelphia's approach to traffic safety and traffic violence. And it is embodied and embedded in the Vision Zero program of the city. Mayors Kenny and Parker have designated Philadelphia a Vision Zero city. Vision Zero is a planning strategy for achieving transportation safety. It is visionary and aspirational because it aims to abolish traffic violence by prioritizing road design and infrastructure improvements over zealous law enforcement and individual behavioral modification. Vision Zero primarily relies on engineering to address deficiencies in the built environment, followed by enforcement and education. Vision Zero contemplates imposing the burden on transportation professionals to build safety into the transportation system by anticipating, correcting for, or discouraging unsafe behavior, and by accommodating the limitations of vulnerable users of the roadway. The pursuit of equity as you can imagine, is a Vision Zero methodology. And equity in this context means acknowledging the social and complex cultural context of driving and road use. And it involves a focus on the pertinent road safety issues, policies, and norms that concern road safety directly and that indirectly are embedded in broader areas of the society. You can understand that that would include racism, ableism, and class superiority. That said, Vision Zero in Philadelphia confronts many inequities in its transportation system by its own emission. I didn't have to look far to find the statistics that indicate that there are inequities with regard to pedestrian safety that arise in our transportation system. Now, I have PowerPoints which Monica is going to marshal for me. Thank you, thank you, Monica. You want to go through the first 3 or 4 for us? Okay, this is the subject. This is the agenda of my talk. The mission we need to keep foremost in mind, and I indicated what that was. And then let's go on to look at the first set of statistics. Philadelphia has a rate of traffic deaths 3 times higher than New York City. That says something. Its rate of traffic deaths is close to that of Los Angeles. The data with regard to pedestrian and vulnerable user fatalities has changed post-pandemic. It was at its peak during the pandemic, and it has only slowly begun to decline. A large portion of the people who die on the streets are either pedestrians or vulnerable road users. Next slide. The PPD also keeps track of people who are seriously injured on the roadways. And you notice that the rates with regard to serious injury for pedestrians and vulnerable users is lower than the rate for fatalities. Fatalities suggest that being a pedestrian is very dangerous in terms of the risk of death. The city reported in 2023 that although pedestrians were involved in only 15% of crashes, they were 35% of persons killed or injured. Now, next slide. The disparities are based on race and ethnicity. They're also based on gender. Male pedestrians were 71% of the fatalities, and females 29%. So something is happening with regard to males, and they were surprisingly younger than I thought they would be. I had assumed that the seniors were the predominant group of persons who were injured and killed on the streets, but they're pretty much at the same level as persons from 18 to 50. So we're getting people who are theoretically in the prime of their or working ages, right? Zip codes. Geography also makes a difference. The zip codes with regard to hospitalization were highest in those zip codes where the percentage of people living in poverty were highest. Next slide. And these are some more of the statistics. This is based on my own perusal of the crash data. The police districts that had the highest number of pedestrian deaths were basically those with high percentages of minority, racial and ethnic minority Philadelphians. And the districts that had 40% of the city's violence accounted for 34% of the pedestrian deaths. So there's a linkage between crime, street crime, the kind of crime that we think of as being a problem in Philadelphia, and pedestrian deaths. And the city has undertaken to try and understand the linkage. Next slide. There also is a difference in terms of driver behavior that's involved with regard to pedestrian injuries. Lots of speeding, and probably more problematic than anything, 56% of the crashes involving pedestrian deaths also involved hit and run drivers. Not hit and run driving, not hit and run cars, but hit and run drivers. These are people who are leaving folks in the street injured. And there is statistical studies which suggest that hit and run driving is more likely to occur in areas where there are higher rates of unemployment and where there is a greater proportion of non-white residents. Next. The question then becomes, what is causing the disparities? And here is a list of what are some of the causes of pedestrian deaths and injuries. Remember that Vision Zero puts aside individual behavior and looks at the infrastructure. And that infrastructure also includes cultural variables and demographic factors, right? These factors have racial implications in Philadelphia, and that's why I'm bringing them into the discussion, even though we don't have statistical studies, quantitative studies linking these variables to the disparity in pedestrian deaths in Philadelphia. But we know that, and next slide, that the built environment in Philadelphia bears evidence of the built environment with regard to dangerous roads, has a relationship to a past history of racial and ethnic discrimination. Philadelphia has identified what is known as the high injury network. It, of course, includes Broad Street. It, of course, includes Roosevelt Boulevard. This is the part of the roadway system that accounts for 80% of the fatal and serious injury crashes in Philadelphia. It is just 12% of Philadelphia streets. The annual report for 2023 indicated that disadvantaged communities have 40% more roads in the HIN than non-disadvantaged communities. And the Action Plan 2025 further acknowledged the concentration of safety problems in lower income communities and communities of color, and that it is not an accident but reflects disinvestment. What is the source of that disinvestment? It relates to the history of the building of the National Highway System, the building of highways in Philadelphia, the allocation of funding for mass transit, which took a backseat to funding for the highway system, urban renewal, and residential lending and insurance redlining. All of that is impacting the exposure today of minority residents to traffic violence. Furthermore, if we look at what's happening with the transit system, that's the next slide. There is a relationship between the can you go back for me? There is a relationship between the transportation system and the transit system. There is a connection. And the Federal Reserve has indicated and this connection is relevant with regard to the building of the highway system, the funding of transit as opposed to highways, urban renewal, etc. But the Federal Reserve in Philadelphia, you can go to the next one now. The Federal Reserve in Philadelphia has found that minorities in Philadelphia, that black commuters in Philadelphia face longer commutes than their white counterparts, that black trips are substantially slower, and that the racial disparity in commuting is even larger for low-income workers and is growing worse for transit riders. Why does this make a difference? It is exposure, the amount of time that pedestrians spend qua pedestrians in relationship to the transit system and the transportation system that impacts their exposure to traffic violence. So when you combine with that the racial disparities in vehicle ownership, you find that this, which is related to that this is related to traffic violence impacting pedestrians at that interface with the transit system, and is therefore a concern with equity. And finally, with regard to sociological and cultural beliefs, norms, customs, and patterns of behavior and their impact on the risks that pedestrians experience, there is some evidence that racism, ethnocentrism, ableism, misogyny can impact pedestrians' vulnerability. But I think more important than any is a cultural orientation which is specific to the transportation system, and that's car culture. Americans have a love of cars that links automobiles with mobility, personal autonomy, wealth, status, prestige, and power. We think of cars as embodying the capacity to provide the driver with independence, that cars achieve high speeds, and it's harnessed to individualized and privatized forms of transportation. Cars play a role in terms of the ritualized entry into adulthood and the psychological differentiation of genders and generations. And I think that the PCHR has the capacity to address some of the dangers that are associated with American car culture. It's interesting that car culture is something that blacks have embraced, even though the benefits of car culture are not totally available to them. How do we know that? Because blacks, along with Latinos and other drivers from disfavored groups, suffered disparate treatment from police surveillance on the roads and from revenue-raising fines and costs that their white counterparts may not. And some of the benefits of car culture come with predatory loans, an inadequate public transportation system that immobilizes people who don't have private cars, environmental pollution in our communities because of proximity to traffic and fossil fuel production and storage facilities, a system of laws that makes driver's licenses the equivalent of a national identity card, and which thereby deprive undocumented residents the privilege of legally driving. Car culture, I think, is fueling subcultural deviant behavior, which is dangerous to users of the roadways, by young people who are stealing cars even though they don't know how to drive, who are riding illegally and performing stunts on dirt bikes and ATVs on the streets, and who are drag racing on the public highways. I was talking to one of the lawyers who is now an executive in the police department, and he said these young people who are drag racing live in the suburbs and they come to the cities to engage in drag racing. So car culture is something that I think we need to take on because it is dangerous, and it is dangerous to vulnerable people in our communities. Where does that leave the PCHR? I want to spend a little time talking about what it is that the PCHR could do. One of the commentators has argued that the greatest effort should be first and foremost to increase motorists' awareness of and respect for vulnerable users of the streets. Stories are important, and we don't get enough of them with regard to people who are left to die on the streets. We don't get enough stories about the people who are harmed, pedestrians who are walking, who do not impose a reciprocal risk on motorists, and who are gravely injured by their encounters with people who are speeding and engaged in other forms of reckless driving. Social media, including YouTube, public hearings, and ceremonies of commemoration, should be supported to educate the public in general and young people in particular about the harms associated with stealing cars, speeding, running over vulnerable walkers, riders of non-conventional conveyances like wheelchairs, and leaving pedestrians to die in the streets. The PCHR could provide a forum or an outreach effort to senior citizens, the disparately abled, night workers, and the marginally housed and employed, so that they can have a forum to raise their public safety concerns. The PCHR could investigate post-crash emergency medical care and support services for the victims of traffic violence. It could inquire into why it is that statistics on injuries are not made public in the way that statistics on fatalities are. And it could assist communities to obtain safety audits, or to conduct safety audits on their own, or to create vehicle-free zones where traffic calming infrastructure improvements have been denied or delayed. Alternatively, or additionally, I think that the PCHR should promote neighborliness. Neighborliness is lacking on our roads. It is, you could think of the roads as being a kind of neighborhood. Values associated with neighborliness toward those living near one's home, cooperation, thoughtfulness, concern, helpfulness, tolerance, civility, have been invoked in connection with traffic safety campaigns. Car culture posits driving as an adversarial and individually focused activity. The cocoon or protective design of contemporary cars and the pro-driver transportation infrastructure makes some drivers feel as if they own the roads, and other users are adversaries, and that their behavior is aggressive and even hostile when it is not. But driving is a social activity that clearly requires coordination and anticipating what other road users might be doing, as well as paying special attention and concern for those who might be vulnerable in the event of a crash. Other users include a wide range of people who have names, personalities, and families just like drivers. Some might actually be the driver's neighbors, and despite the teaching of car culture, no one user group has ownership or exclusive rights to the road. And equity affirms access to the roads, the safety accorded each type of road user, the values and social norms regarding mutual consideration, and even altruism. The Commission should promote the behavior that it wants to see on the roadways, which is neighborliness. We should reach out to walkers and rollers who are changing the primacy accorded to car culture, people who are providing safety instruction for disabled or disparately abled walkers and rollers. We should highlight the diverse bikers who are undermining the stereotypal type of employers as white, young, well off, able bodied, mostly males. And we should encourage employers of workforces that travel in the darkness before sunrise and after sunset to offer sneaker giveaways or provide safety vests, reflective sashes, blinking lights to their walker, roller, and biker employees. That's my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, first, I want to just say thank you so much for providing that very comprehensive report and recommendations for us at the commission. We thank you for your work in this on this very important social justice issue, because we know that, as you mentioned in your presentation, a lot of the traffic patterns that cause the most fatalities and injuries are related to neighborhoods that were redlined, a form of housing discrimination. And so we know that the infrastructure in those neighborhoods seems to lend to more injury and fatality for pedestrians. So I guess the one thing that gives hope is that at least we know that it's on the radar of the mayor and the administration. Um, I'm particularly hopeful about the uh, subway system that they're creating up and down the boulevard. I think that's a long-term plan. And so we know that the speed cameras have greatly reduced the amount of traffic deaths on the boulevard. And I know one of the things that we were looking at when we initially did this project was how can we look at both the accomplishments that have happened, but also look at some of the needs or some of the ways that we need to strengthen our outreach and our communication to those vulnerable communities. So I'm thankful that you laid out a comprehensive set of recommendations for us with regard to that. Um, it looks like we have a question from Matthew.
Thank you so much for that presentation. This topic is actually dear to me as well. I tend to walk wherever I go or take the bus, but walking to school when I was in law school, I would have to cross at Kelly Drive near the Art Museum. And if anyone has walked across that, they know that the drivers there don't respect the crosswalk, and it felt very dangerous. I'd had many conversations with my partner about potential solutions, and I think at dangerous spots like that, a raised crosswalk could be really helpful because the cars have to go slower over that raised portion, and so even if there is an accident there, uh, it would be less likely to uh, cause grievous harm. So I really appreciated this paper, this draft, and wanted to offer that as a potential addition. Thank you.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that walkers are not as organized as bikers. And we need to figure out a way to get them organized. I've started talking to organizations that are in the transportation safety space, NGOs in space, and there does seem to be a gap there. The problem, of course, is money. Infrastructure improvements may work, but there's a long list of projects that seem to have priority. So unless we can get people out on the street stopping traffic, it may take forever to get that raised walkway that you're looking for. And so the question is, to what extent can the PCHR support communities in their efforts to bring attention to the need for these kinds of safety improvements. So if you want to get some people out there, but maybe you can get some law students.
Yeah. I want to also acknowledge we have a member from Council Member Cindy Bass's team that has joined us as well. And so
Great.
we have representation from two elected officials here. And so it's very important that they hear the findings of your research and some of the recommendations. So I'm happy that they both joined us.
Well, I think it's important that people understand that the PCHR actually has a history of doing these kinds of projects, and we were, I think, very successful in terms of what we did with regard to intergroup violence in the schools, and also with regard to problems in the intergroup problems in the neighborhood that required this kind of work. And we've also worked on discrimination in public accommodations. So this is just another facet of what the PCHR does. So, and I appreciate the support that I've gotten from Kia and also from Sarah with regard to continuing this project.
I can see Ms. Kersey has her hand up, and I think Commissioner Tibbs had his hand up, but now I don't see it up anymore.
Thank you, Commissioner Riggs. Professor Austin, I had a question. I wanted to know, with your research, did you take into any consideration school children? I know I have a young one that walks to school, and many mornings I see people who don't fully stop at stop signs and the lack of crossing guards. And these children are essentially walking themselves to school with people that don't respect traffic signals. And I know many times mine has almost gotten hit because someone wanted to roll and stop instead of actual stopping.
The school system is covered by a separate program under Vision Zero, the Safe Schools. And there is, of course, a division of labor with regard to that. So the process for complaining is somewhat different. But I will investigate that and get back to you with regard to exactly what office you ought to call and what organizations you might contact to see if you can't get some response to the kind of conduct that you've been seeing at your child's school.
Commissioner Tibbs, did you want to raise an issue or no?
My question has actually been answered, but I thought of another one, so I'll ask it now. Hi, Regina. Thank you so much for the presentation. I actually have sort of a two-part question. One is to consider to get your insight on how much sort of the food delivery services, particularly those individuals that use motorized bicycles, are playing into the context for pedestrian fatalities or pedestrian injuries. And then the other question has to do with not trying, I guess, to blame the victim here, but Philadelphia as a cultural walking style. Most of the pedestrians do a pretty fantastic job of not waiting for the traffic signals properly. I kind of call it the Philly cross. You see it here in Philadelphia. You might not necessarily see it as much in some other cities, maybe perhaps in New York as well, but I wonder to what degree that might also be playing into the the statistics as they pertain to pedestrian injuries.
Okay, I didn't know about the Philly Walk. The Philly Walk, is it the equivalent of jaywalking? You're going against the light and going against the traffic.
That's correct. That's correct. There's a lot of that.
Well, the interesting thing is that Vision Zero would require, um, in in all with all due respect, inquire as to whether or not there is something wrong with the infrastructure that is forcing people to engage in this kind of behavior. or if there is something about the infrastructure that is not recognizing the needs of pedestrians. The notion that jaywalking, which seems to be against the law, might be reasonable under circumstances, certain circumstances, is something that Vision Zero theoretically would take into account. We have a transportation system which is designed to facilitate the flow of traffic, where pedestrians are theoretically viewed as obstacles. But Vision Zero suggests that maybe we ought to flip that and give some consideration to what the needs of pedestrians might be. In the block between, I guess it's 33rd and 32nd on Chestnut, they have erected a crosswalk in the middle of the street with lights so that the Drexel kids can get from one side of Chestnut Street to the other. That makes a lot of sense because that's what that's what the population in the area needs. So you have to think somewhat differently with regard to the Philly Walk. And then your first question was what? I can't.
Oh, it had to do with the motorized bicycles and food delivery services.
That's an area where there is a tension between the walkers and the vulnerable folks who are not on motorized conveyances, and motorcyclists, and to a certain extent bicycle riders. Their interests don't necessarily align. But as far as I can tell from the data that I've looked at, it's not clear that there is a problem with regard to these motorized delivery people. When you see these shops that have nothing but motorized vehicles for delivery people, you begin to wonder whether they're like hornets or they're swarming around and making it more difficult for people to walk. But that is not something that I have seen addressed either by the Vision Zero folks or the bicycle advocates. But I suspect that that's going to pop up in the inquiries going forward. Vision Zero has just released its 2024 annual report, and if you're interested in knowing more about Vision Zero, particularly with regard to the schools, I urge you to just search for the 2024 PHL Vision Zero report, and you can see what they have been doing and what they plan to do with regard to safety in terms of schools and school children.
Attorney Webster, I think you had a question.
So I'm looking at the traffic violence October 2024 draft from Professor Austin. And I just wanted to highlight, I think it runs with what Professor Tibbs was asking about. So crosswalks were invented because of cars. Jaywalking is a concept promoted by the auto industry to combat the perception that cars were dangerous. A hostile infrastructure may account for what we call risky pedestrian behavior. I think that really, when you start to peel back those layers, I have learned now that we've set up a city, not Philadelphia specifically, but we design for vehicles as opposed to people. And so I don't know if I have a point, but yeah, I thank you for this paper. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, when we know who is likely to be on the downside of that, and the groups are those that are of special interest to the PCHR, it matters and it becomes more important, I think, for us to at least do what we can to raise the visibility of the victims and the adequacy of the protection of the interests of people who are like them. Good point. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Commissioner Austin, it is such a pleasure to see and hear you again. Many of us, Rebecca Alpert and I, and probably others, had the pleasure of working with you for over a decade. And your thoughtful, insightful, and consistently aggressive view of what the commission can do is so welcome and so appreciated. And wow, you've just given us so much to think about. I certainly never thought of jaywalking as a rational response, but I will now. So thank you so much for that presentation. I don't want to cut anybody off. Did anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, I don't see any others. So thank you so much. We appreciate your time, your effort, and you know, the vigorous energy you bring to the mission of the commission.
I want to thank Monica for putting up with my with assisting me as well. Thank you, Monica.
You're more than welcome.
Okay, I think at this point we can move on to the just the housekeeping at the end, which is to announce the dates of our next meetings, which are January 10th for the executive meeting and January 17th for the public session. Readers for the month of December are Commissioner Shalimar Thomas, Commissioner Ricks, and Commissioner Tibbs. Can I have a motion to adjourn? I see Commissioner Alpert move to adjourn. Is there a second? Commissioner Ho, all in favor? Just vote visually if we can. Great. Okay, I think this meeting is adjourned, and thank you again for the presentation.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Commissioner Ricks.
Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.
And
You as well. Take